For all of you Gen 6 guys who are looking for like, hey, what are the different lifts that I can get? Well, when you look at, just a little perch collar lift, you're not going to get as much flex out of that lift as if, you're going with the Icon $10,000 package.
Maybe a 2 wrench.
Yeah. 2
to 3 wrench job, out of 5. So, and then of course there's the disc brake conversion, which is, going all out, you can spend all kinds of money on that and it will stop on a dime. It'll stand on its nose practically.
If you don't have it lifted and you have small radial tires, it is really comfortable to drive just down the road. It's easy to drive and probably easy to go pretty fast in, but it's when you start jacking it up and putting big tires on it, and like we all love to do, that's when all the geometry of the steering and suspension get all messed up.
All right, here we go. Kicking off episode number 2 of the Broncast.
2.
That's exciting. Back in the shop again, and
yep.
You were just you were on the road. You were in Medford, Oregon. What's
yeah,
there?
Yeah. Well, my parents live in Medford, and so the whole family came up. But more importantly, and more what to do with this podcast is Tom's Offroad, formerly Tom's Bronco Parts. They have their yearly event is up there, and their shop is up there as well. So it's one of those things where they're always doing stuff up there. But yeah, so I went up there to go hang out at their event and hang out with my parents. But man, I love, there is something totally different. So I go to all the Bronco Super Celebration East events every year. Amazing event. You should definitely go. But getting out and going to a West event it just feels different. Like I don't know what it is. Like it just has a different feeling than some of these East Coast events. But yeah, so I got to hang out at that event, and it's a cool event because they start with like a Bronco drive. They go you can either do like wheeling on the McGrew Trail, or you can go up to Crater Lake, which is a beautiful 3-hour drive. So it's like all these beautiful Broncos driving around on Friday, and then Saturday they have like the show event. Then they go to all these wineries and breweries. It's just cool. It's like a fun event, and I love you get to see like the staff that you work with regularly. Like I met, Freddie, who you always deal with.
Frankie,
yeah. At the event. And so we got to hang out with him. But it's like you call these shops all the time and, talk to people about your Bronco, and being able to get there and meet them. It's a lot of fun. So I enjoyed that event. What have you been doing?
Yeah, I didn't go anywhere again. Maybe next week I'll get to go somewhere. You know what I did? I sat on my sofa and I read my favorite magazine, Bronco Driver.
Yes.
And it has this, let's see, which issue is this? Number 88. So it's 88. pretty recent. And this one has a race red Gen 6 Bronco like mine, but in this issue they show BDS converting it to a half cab.
That thing is cool.
Which is pretty sick. It's called, I think you find it on the internet. It's called Command Fire Bronco.
Yeah.
Fire
Something.
Command Bronco.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty amazing. They threw every part and lift kit and skid plate you can put on this thing, bumpers, lights.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
I saw it was at the BDS Bronco was at the Bronco event in Sand Hollow, Utah in March. United by Bronco, that event. It was pretty cool. Definitely a cool Bronco to see. Well, moving into our podcast here, little DIY or PAY. We started this last week. Do you do it yourself or do you pay PAY someone to do it for you? Last week we were talking about fluids. We were talking about the first things that you should check under your Bronco when you first get a Gen 1, for anything less than $45,000, you should be checking these things.
It's going to leak somewhere or everywhere.
But moving on from that, if the first thing you do is you check for leaks, the second thing you want to do is you want to check your brakes. What are you looking at there with brakes? Well, talk us through, what would someone expect on their Bronco, on their first gen, with their brakes?
Well, the funny thing about the brakes is, the Bronco was kind of the stepchild at Ford. The Mustang got everything, and if the Bronco was lucky, they could get a part from another vehicle, and the brakes were, there were enough brakes if you didn't do anything to the truck. If you didn't lift it and put giant tires on it and throw 400 pounds worth of bumpers, and you just start throwing all this weight on it, and you don't upgrade the brakes. So, factory, they didn't even have a brake booster. So, of course, no disc brakes. Basically, you start with the brakes, that you can do. There's all kinds of great upgrades you can do to the brakes. You can, as simply as maintain and service your brakes. That's probably the most important thing, because most Broncos that I get in the shop are like, it doesn't stop. That's almost what all of them say. So, we offer a brake booster kit, which has like a dual diaphragm booster. So it's like having twice the boost on the brakes. But, a rebuild, which is something you can do yourself. Even these brake booster kits you can do at home. They're maybe a 2 to 3 wrench job, out of 5. So, and then of course there's the disc brake conversion, which is, going all out. You can spend all kinds of money on that, and it will stop on a dime. It'll stand on its nose practically. So,
and I always tell people, if you aren't ready to do the disc brake kit, I think the booster is a great option. Just something easy to buy, and you kind of just pull off the old master cylinder, put on the booster, and then the master cylinder on the end. But I would say adjusting your brakes is an important thing that, a lot of old, these new car people don't really know. Like it's something that I didn't really know how to do before I got my Bronco. Like, what, you can adjust your drum brakes so that it stops better, but it's true, they made it with that little cutout in the back of the drum brake caliper, or not the caliper, but the backing plate. And you just take a screwdriver and you adjust your drum brakes with that little star wheel inside, up or down, to tighten or loosen them. Because what you want is it to be one click away from drag. So, you want to adjust it so that the drum brakes are one click away from touching the drum at all times. So jack the front of your Bronco up, leave the wheel on, adjust it, and then by hand just turn the wheel. And if it is slowing itself down, that means that your drum brakes are adjusted all the way out and they're touching. So just go one click back so that when you turn the wheel, it's not spinning, and then your brakes are adjusted. You do it to all 4 wheels, man, you're going to stop great. And I always tell people, if you're having brake problems, go out to a gravel road, get up to 30 miles an hour and lock up your brakes on purpose. On gravel, it's pretty easy. And look at your skid marks. Did all 4 tires lock up at the same time? Was it just your back tires? Was it just your passenger front tire? And kind of look at what is locking up and figure out why the other ones aren't locking up, or how to adjust it so you can get, all 4 of them to lock up together at the same time.
And if you do decide to tackle that job, and you get into the front, you're probably going to find that the fronts are operational, they're out of adjustment, need new shoes. But when you get to the back, you may not find any shoes. It's pretty common to go back there and one shoe's practically gone and the other one has all of its pad on it. So, because people just tend to rely on the fronts. It's like, hey, it stops.
Yeah, definitely. Pulling the tire off, taking the hub, the drum off is quite a challenge if you've never done it before. So that's the toughest part about rebuilding your drum brakes, is actually getting that drum off, because it's probably rusted onto your Bronco. So it's, going to be, I had to cut on the 74 I'm working on. I had to cut them off with a angle grinder and just hammer it out. But But yeah, once you get that off, I mean, really DIY, I would definitely DIY a drum brake, rebuilding your drum brakes, because it's something that it's easy to do, easy enough to do. It's a challenge, but it's easy enough to do. I like your wrench. I'd say it's two to three wrenches
and a big hammer.
Yeah, maybe a blowtorch.
Yeah.
But it's so rewarding, and you're gonna feel like you accomplished something.
Well, and you have a video on that. I've watched a bunch of brake videos, and you do a good job of showing the parts and what you're doing and adjusting the brakes. You show the wheels. So I've seen videos where you just see the back of somebody. It's like, what are you doing? I want to be around you looking at the video. So yeah. So definitely with the brakes, I would DIY those. Get your brakes working well. And I like what you said about upgrades. Like there's some cool upgrades up there. And I would say upgrades like swapping a disc brakes is a little bit more. That would be a good one to pay someone to do. But just doing a brake booster or something like that's a good DIY. Yeah, that's you can do that in a day easy. So, and you have immediate results.
Yeah.
And everything bolts right in.
Right.
Like there's no fabrication required.
Yeah, it's pretty easy. Well, moving on, we answered some questions last week in our first episode. We got a question in this week because everybody loves Donnie. This question's for you. And it says, "Hey, Donnie, you said in the last episode that you make Bronco Tubs." You actually put them together. You don't make them. But what's the biggest lesson that you have learned from fitting the panels together? I feel like this is sum up your entire work history
without giving all the secret sauce away. It's not unlike building anything else. The foundation is what's so important. So the more time you take measuring everything, getting it square, symmetrical, use, if you can get a level surface, use levels. But the time that you spend on that means that when you go to put the skin or all the body panels onto that, stuff just lines up so much better. And, people tend to look right across the top of the doors and the top of the beds, and they want to see that those are straight across. There's no drop. They want to see that style line that's just below the shoulder. There's that nice seam that makes the Bronco so good looking. They look at that. It's got a gentle bow on both sides. So those are things that if you don't get the foundation right, it's almost impossible to get that line where you want it. So, it's funny. One of the sayings with all the body shops are, people make panels and it's the body shop's job to make them fit. Yeah. Some panels fit better than others. We like the ones that we can buy and they fit, and maybe just have to take the E-coat off so we can weld them on. Those are our favorites. Yeah. But so the time that you spend with each part ends up making the final product so much better. If you can install parts where you don't have tension in the part, then everything's just going to work better for you.
Oh, that's a good way to put it. I've never heard that. If you install it without tension. Because I've heard a lot of guys, it's like, oh yeah, I'll put in a couple tack welds and then, bend it into place kind of thing. But that's definitely adding some good tension in there.
Yeah, we want to literally get the part to just fit, At one point we were doing a quarter panel. I was talking to someone. I said, think of this as a piece of glass. If you have to bend the corners so hard that it's going to break, you really haven't fitted the part properly yet.
Wow. Yeah. What, this is a follow-up question just in my brain. So if you were building a tub, and I think of, I don't know if you ever saw Matt's Garage on YouTube. He started building his tub and he got totally discouraged and got off and gave up because he was stuck. Where would you recommend if someone were starting from scratch, or they were like going to replace, almost every panel on their Bronco? Where do you start? Do you start at the firewall? Do you start at, doors? Do you have a quick answer for that? I know that's a tough one.
It's funny that the trucks all seem to rust in about the same spot, and they're critical spots, like the B pillar or what's called the striker post across that. It's like, how do you fix that? You can buy a new floor pan assembly, and they're reasonable. They're under $1,000, and I think it's 15 pieces of metal already put together for you.
Really?
Yeah, and it's like, so from there you would add the firewall going forward, and going back you would build the bed, and you can literally build an entire bed and attach it as an assembly to the floor pan. It's not how we build them in the shop, but it can be done that way, and the results are good.
Yeah.
So, and I would think a guy building his own tub or fixing his truck would be happy, but many pickup trucks, the beds are rusted out, and people will just buy a new bed assembly.
Yep.
And, it's how they essentially think of the Bronco the same way. It's a bed on a floor pan, and then you've got the firewall, and going forward, they're pretty basic.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a good way to think about it.
Yeah, and let's talk about things that we really like to do, which is buy parts. I buy parts every week.
Yep.
Just don't tell my wife.
Yeah.
Have them shipped here. The ones that come home.
I
get in trouble for.
I have carts in probably every Bronco site full of parts. Like, just saved carts like on their websites, just like, one day I'm going to buy all of this, and one day I'm going to buy all of this, and how much is it if I get everything here? So, yeah.
Yeah, I think so we each pick a part every week, and what's your part this week?
So I wanted to give a little love to our Generation 6 Bronco owners, the Gen 6 guys, because, they're if they're new Bronco owners, maybe they don't have a Gen 1, they're looking for some good parts to buy, and I've talked to a lot of different people about different stuff, but I would say for the Gen 6, one of my favorite parts is the GRT perch collar lift. And I installed one of these. I let Garrett install it at his shop, and I filmed it on Bronco Nation, and he let me do some of the work. But man, the little perch collar lift for a Sasquatch Gen 6 Bronco is a great lift. I think he sells it on his website for $250, and it's literally just a piece of metal that slides over the shock collar, and the spring sits on top of it, and that's what gives the lift then to the Bronco, which is a lot better option than a puck style lift where a puck just sits on top of the shock and the spring, because that puck will actually scoot down the geometry of that whole coil and shock assembly, which means that it will droop further down, and it'll actually knock up against your some of your components there under the Bronco. So the perch collar doesn't change that geometry. So it's actually safer to use if you're going off road. Now, if you're just mall crawling, then the puck collar or the puck lift is just as good. But yeah, so that perch collar lift is a favorite of mine for sure.
Well, and that's the first thing I want to do to my 2-door Gen 6 is it's just like, it just needs to be a couple inches taller. It would just be perfect. And I think the 4-doors too, the 35-inch tires need a little bit more room. Now,
Donnie doesn't know that I'm going to do this, so it's a little surprise for him. But Donnie we may not even be able to talk about this yet, but Donnie's Bronco is over at Ian's shop, or it's going to be at the Big Tire Garage. And one of my clients is Ian Johnson, who has a show, 4-Wheeler on Motor Trend. And so if you want to see Donnie's Bronco getting some sweet upgrades, it's going to be on 4-Wheeler. And today Ian texted me and said, "Hey, are you recording your podcast today?" And I was like, "I am." And he was like, "Well, when you're on air, you need to show some pictures to Donnie of the shocks and of the everything that he's got coming his way." So there are your Icon. What are those? Control arms?
Yeah, wow.
Icon control arms, billet.
That looks like it belongs on a spaceship.
Oh, I mean,
that's awesome.
It is amazing. And there's the shock and reservoir.
Oh, yeah.
And there are your tires.
Oh, yeah. Look at those, man. Those are the Icon wheels.
Yep.
Yeah, in the gray, too. That's going to really pop. Oh, those are 37s. Those are enormous. Yeah.
Mickey Thompson 37s. Oh, they're going to be beautiful.
That's awesome. That's gonna lift it up like 4.5 inches. So I'm gonna have to get those rope handles so my wife can climb in the truck. She can barely get in it now.
So, and I was talking about the perch collar, how easy that is. The suspension that you're getting is like new control arms. It is a complete lift, and it's almost $10,000 from Icon. Like that's a big investment. But obviously you can get a lot more lift out of it. You can get a lot more, your angles are going to be a lot better. It's going to be a lot more off-road capable, but you're paying for that. So for all of you Gen 6 guys who are looking for like, hey, what are the different lifts that I can get? Well, when you look at, just a little perch collar lift, you aren't going to be able to get as much angles. You're not going to get as much flex out of that lift as if, you're going with the Icon $10,000 package. So little Gen 6 action there.
Oh yeah, that's nice. Now you got me all excited about it. So
yeah, that episode probably won't come out for another couple months, but he sent that to me today.
We'll keep everyone posted on that.
Yeah, for sure. What's your part for today?
I install a lot of these. We talked previously about brake booster kits, and I just got to be honest. The brake booster kit for the money makes the biggest improvement on the brakes, especially if it's lifted. It's got 33-inch tires. It just makes a huge difference, and it's easy to install. Give it 2.5 wrenches. It doesn't take a lot of time to do, and the results are immediate. So for me, like, stopping is almost more important than anything because I like the lifted trucks with the big tires, and you need more brakes. Yep.
Yeah, I did that on my 75, and super easy install, just putting on the brake booster. The adjustment was something that I kind of had to figure out where, a lot of people don't realize when you put the master cylinder on the booster, you need that rod that's there. That's almost, it is pushing on the master cylinder. So
then you just back it off.
Yeah. So you need to put it on so your master cylinder doesn't fit all the way. Then you just back it off a little bit so it just barely, it's like mated perfectly.
But I feel like the instructions are pretty good. I've installed 3 different brands, and the one that we're doing this week in the shop is a Tom's kit. Yeah, and we got that. We got that along with a bunch of other things. But the Tom's kit was kind of cool. It comes with a coated brake reservoir instead of the steel reservoir that, and there's this coated black, and, they immediately, if you don't, we usually clear coat the old steel ones so that they still look silver and they don't turn to rust immediately. So it's kind of a little trick you can do. But this new one looks great. It's got like an oval reservoir lid that's CNC'd. It's just a really nice looking brake booster, and it fits over. It's designed to fit right over at an angle the stock inner fender tub.
Nice.
So no modification required there.
Nice.
Yeah, so moving on a little bit, we want to touch on history just a little bit before we finish this episode and talk about more things that were leading up to the Bronco before they even came out with the name for it. And some of the things that had happened since World War II is 1950. That was the advent of the interstate system throughout the United States, and imagine driving a World War II Jeep on the interstate, and the speed limits are 60 miles an hour plus, and it's completely topped out probably all over the road. And so Ford had some objectives that they had come up with for the Bronco on things that they wanted to achieve with it. And then with the interstate, it's like, hey, we want this thing to be comfortable on the highway. So that was one of the things that was important to them. So that while they were studying the UTV market at the time, that's in the process of transitioning to an SUV market, as we think of it today, was like, how can we make these more comfortable? How can we, like a modern SUV is today? Those were their concerns back in 1960. And the market in 1960 was a total of 11,000 units were sold. That's between, Willys and Scout had just come out. And in 61, when the Scout did come out, I think it grew to about 32,000 units.
Oh, wow.
So the Scout doubled the size of that market, and Ford was watching this and saying, we need to get in right now. So in 1964, the market segment had matured. It was about 40,000 units a year. It sort of plateaued. You not only had Jeep and Scout in the market, you had Toyota Land Cruisers in there, and but I think Jeep and Scout were about 85% of the market. So Ford's like, we got to get in here. We got to get going. So they wanted to create a vehicle. After doing all their market research, said they talked to hundreds and hundreds of people without letting them know they were Ford, because they didn't want to let anyone know they were getting into the market. And what they were looking at is something that was had less rain coming in. That was actually number one on their list.
Really?
Yeah. So, fewer leaks, more insulated, more comfortable. You can contain the heat, where someone could actually maybe drive this to work every day.
Yeah.
And it could be driven on the highways at highway speeds. And the Bronco was amazing on the highway. They had developed this new axle with coils or springs on top, and it's very different than a leaf spring front end.
Yeah, because the Scout was a leaf spring front end, the Jeeps were, and Ford all of a sudden goes to this other coil sprung front end.
Yeah. So it did everything better. Cornered better, rode better, smoother. So it had approach angles were better. You didn't have these shackles and things hanging down in the front. So everything was better. And like I said, the most important to them, this is funny, but it was like better paint jobs. Apparently paint was an issue back then. Wow. They wanted a better looking vehicle than Jeep, and the Scout did look different than a Jeep, though.
Yeah. But, I mean, Scout and Ford look very similar, like how those came out, but the Bronco definitely looked different than the Jeep. I think that's so interesting, though, that some of their objectives coming out, like it really was. I mean, and it is, if you don't have it lifted and you have small radial tires, it is really comfortable to drive just down the road. It's easy to drive, and probably easy to go pretty fast in, but it's when you start jacking it up and putting big tires on it, and like we all love to do, that's when all the geometry of the steering and suspension get all messed up, and you start introducing death wobble, or you ruin your caster angle and your truck doesn't go back to center or whatever it is, and you mess all that stuff up. So it's interesting that those were some of their objectives, obviously from getting market research back from people who own Jeeps and who own the Scouts and Land Cruisers and all that. And it's such an interesting, like when you think back on those times, it's such an interesting era to be entering into. And you don't really, you called it, what was it, UTV, the UTV market? What did that mean?
Well, utility vehicle, and then it went from, they were taking it from utility to a sport utility vehicle. Like we think of them today, it was like, what do we need to grow this market? Instead of just getting some of that pie, it's just like people want all these things when they were asking them, here's the things I don't like about my Willys or my Scout. And so they were trying to address those and come out with their own product. And, cool. I want to talk about also is the fact that they hadn't come up with the name even at this point yet.
Oh.
And, so in 1964, I think it was like in July of 64, they had a meeting with all the execs, and it was in the Rotunda, which is part of the design center. And it's actually a giant, what do you call those? It spins around on the floor.
Yeah.
Like a lazy Susan. Yeah, I didn't want to say that, but okay. Sorry if your name's Susan. And it was really cool because it's all curtained off, and everyone can stand around it as it rotates. You can see the different angles, and they had a clay model of it in July in 64. And, everybody's looking at it, making their notes, deciding what they should do. And in the financial department, or executives are like, we give it 5 years. We'll give you the money for 5 years, and we'll give you. I think they started out with, I don't know how long the money lasted, but to develop the truck, they were given like $10 million.
Wow.
2 months later, but everybody else at Ford, design engineers and the truck group and all, they're like, oh yeah, so it's going to go way longer than 5 years. I don't think they expected that first design, which is almost exactly like the clay model. It's amazing. You would just think it's a regular Bronco. They nailed it.
Yeah, that's super cool. I love hearing stuff like that. Yeah, it's like the history of, hey, we'll give this 5 years. It's like the company, some of the people in the company didn't even believe in what was, but it really did change the market for SUVs, the sport utility vehicle. And that's cool.
Yeah, they doubled the market when they got into it. And so we'll talk about how they came up. The marketing department, once the money's dished out, the marketing department comes in and doesn't take over, but they start making decisions for the engineers, and they have to design around those decisions and things. That's just kind of how it goes. But we'll talk about that next time. And if you want to see a picture of that clay model truck, it's in Todd Zurcher's book that we talked about last time.
Nice. Well, thank you guys so much for sticking around for another episode of the Broncast. John and Donnie here. We appreciate you guys listening, and we're looking forward to seeing you in future episodes.